G'day, guys. So, this is the Shipping News issue number 7, and everything's been done except for the little blurb, which is the first video, which is getting you guys to watch it. And there's so much going on that's it's actually taken me all week long. I keep doing videos, deleting them, wiping them, starting again, and I guess it's because what this Shipping News is and everything that we've encapsulated is really it's tapping into things that have been going on now for quite some time in my own mental health space and personal life, and that I guess when I think about it, is that I started my newspaper down in Dunedin in 2003, and from 2003 to 2008, I had a good little newspaper. It was understood to be an alternative paper. You didn't read it to get the mainstream news. Um, it provided people all sorts of alternative aspects from things, and I think most people who read it would have realised that I was sort of a lefty, and then so I was one of those people that was more interested in community and in arts. Um, I, in fact, was very much anti-corporate. I was being anti-military. Um, I have critiqued my government, and I've tried to make it doesn't matter whether it's the Labor government or the national government. As a journalist, I've held them to accountable. And I think the funny thing is, I think about this from, I started my paper in 2003 to 2007. And in 2011, I had a really nice partner, and I lived in Northeast Valley, and I was a part of the community. And I pretty much felt that we lived in a pretty normal, stable New Zealand, and there were differences between, the different groups. People voted National and Labour, but fundamentally, we all gave a shit about each other, and we weren't that far enough that it wasn't impossible to sit down and enjoy a nice, dinner or conversation or whatever, a community. And somewhere along the lines, and things I guess Facebook started to creep in, and the way that we started to talk to each other on social media, maybe that part was part of the equation. I'm not entirely sure. But what I do know is that, it's now that's 2023, um, and I'm really don't know, my politics hasn't changed, my viewpoint hasn't changed, but I'm left sort of feeling like I'm somehow like I'm a bad, naughty person in my country for dare challenging the official narrative. I've watched my social media online get dismantled and ripped apart pretty much since 2015, since the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, where anything that challenges corporate line is suddenly um, it gets pushed right down on the algorithm. It gets attacked by nameless people that you don't have any right of review. And of course, while that's all been going on, of course, the things like the COVID have come along and wiped out my clientele basis. So, trying to put out a regular newspaper that gets read on a regular basis, that gives people that, it's become impossible. So I've largely been effectively marginalised to a large degree because I won't jump on the national narrative and make the money available by telling the public government stories that are available to the public. And of course, because I won't do that, then it means that when I apply to go up to Wellington to cover the parliamentary, no, I don't get acknowledged as an accredited journalist. Suddenly, the government's deciding whether I'm a journalist or not, and the courts are encroaching upon it. And it doesn't feel like I'm living in a democratic New Zealand anymore. And when I went up to do this protest, I really came there because I wanted to see with my own eyes what I suspected already, which was that the level of what was actually happening on the ground versus what was happening in reality weren't the same. And that has definitely been my experience. And it's been incredibly confusing because most of the people on the ground that I've spoken to are people that are, what I would say is from my background. They're people that don't necessarily accept the government viewpoint. They're not stupid. They've got an interest in things other than beer and rugby. Um, and they're not stupid people either. And admittedly, I hear them say some things which make me cringe a wee bit because, my profession is I understand the media and I probably even understand most things that go, you know, spook of the night. And so something they go, but then I guess when I look at the connection of what some of the people that are choosing to be a mainstream narrative, and this is a mainstream corporate narrative that has brought you weapons of mass destructions in Iraq. They've brought you huge amounts level of propaganda in the first Gulf War. we've seen it bring up through the Bush administration, the Reagan administration, the Clinton administration, uh, of a Western US government that's really not that healthy. And we've seen it suddenly shift from being about the policies and what's actually happening to the brand. So Obama gets elected, and suddenly, because he's immediately a black president, it's just assumed that the credentials of the government is that they're a left-wing liberal government. And yet we saw Obama drop more bombs than any US president beforehand. Donald Trump gets elected, all becomes about whether if Trump believes it, then immediately everybody, if you're a liberal, you must just ignore it completely because Trump said it. And then somewhere the disconnection, and trust me, like, I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, but as we saw in terms of the source of the COVID, that actually that's not a gold standard. Some things Trump says things which are actually, admittedly, the guy is an opportunist, but somewhere we lost the ability to look at facts for what they are. It became who was saying them, if either for us or for against him. Jacinda comes along, and it seems to be we fall into one camp or the other. You must either believe Jacinda or you disbelieve Jacinda. The Ukraine event now is the latest thing that is actually rolled on. Oh, you must, if you're against Putin, the assumption immediately that therefore you must be supportive of the Western NATO expansion system. Somewhere we seem to have lost the ability to say, well, you know what? Maybe somebody like Putin can do something stupid, and the other side isn't actually any side better. Maybe this is just a result of this whole superpower politics that's been going on for 40, 50 years, where the certain individuals turn around that might is right, and they float up to the top of their particular regimes on either side of the curtain. And the end result is a situation where we're producing, we're literally 100 seconds to midnight. That's how close we are to being an extinction event. And this is something that we start worrying about now because our media tells us. And yet, these are the things which for the last 10, 15 years, I have been trying to make people aware of. I've been saying, look, have you not noticed all the US military infrastructure and facilities that are popping up in New Zealand under the guise of Space Guide, the Rocket Lab in Mahia Peninsula, the expansion of Operation Deep Freeze, the US Pacific Reset? So all these things when we turn around and say, well, I critique Jacinda, you must be outright. I'm going, well, no, my politics haven't changed. I'm actually still opposing you as I would be. We know Chris Luxon's going to come in, it's going to be exactly the same. And all the people that vote for Chris against Chris Luxon are going to say, oh, if only those people had supported Chris. They won't acknowledge the fact that the system itself is what's broken. And that's kind of where I am right now, where I'm going, we're not in a very good place, New Zealand. And we have a media that's not fit for purpose. It's not able to deal with complex issues in a way which it just explains issues without actually pushing or taking someone's side with some agenda. What I saw during Parliament was complete, disconnection. Like, yes, there were things wrong with some of the people, some of the ideas that some of the people believed in the Parliament. Some of them were, but majority was very straightforward. We thought the people turned around to Parliament and said, we think these mandates have reached an end and we would like to have a discussion of our government. And our government turned around and acted in a way which is just abhorrent and is not. We've got a government that is seriously acting with overreach. And yes, the new government that comes in is going to do exactly the same thing. But the issue isn't whether it's national labour. The issues are far deeper. And unfortunately, we've got a corporate media base that is either funded by the government funding with the understanding that if they don't, that their life screens get chopped off, or a corporate-based media that's understanding that they are there to chase agenda, and you don't work there unless you understand that. That's not actually very good at presenting us with the information and making us aware of what's going on. We've become, for all our digital technology, an incredibly unaware kind of society. We believe what we want to believe. We cherry-pick the dogma that fits our facts. So, what I've done to try here is present you an uptake on what I saw, and yes, to show the demonstration of what the media reported and what the police reported is not true. And that's really, 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 really worrying that there's so many of my friends that think that, oh, no, that those were just the Donald Trump. Well, that's not what went on. Yeah. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody on the other side were 100% correct or 100% wrong. but it means that we're at a point now where we're seriously, as a society, polarized, and we're disconnected, and we don't really know what's actually happening now there. And anyone that tries and kind of challenges this narrative immediately, in turn, gets a star or a sticker slapped on them, and it's not getting any better, and it's getting worse. Anyway, that's my little introduction. A little bit rambly it is, but I said it's the closest thing. I've been thinking about this for quite some time, and I really want my friends, who believe that what happened up in Kuala was all Donald Trump, to understand it wasn't. It was much more complicated than that. And we have got real problems because we've got a government now that's actually quite willing to use violence on its own people. And if you think that doesn't need to be challenged and that doesn't need to be called on account, then you're carrying on this delusion that somehow thinking that we're going to return to this normal situation, and we haven't. We've got some really deep-seated issues that, and I don't even know how to sort them actually out. But I can say that we need to start realizing, really being aware that we've got these corporate entities at the top, and they don't mean us any good. And it doesn't matter whether it's National or Labor. We're probably going to see a more corporatized government with power and wealth is centralized more. And with that, it's going to come, of course, us being involved in these superpower conflicts, which, we're a country that we bought in nuclear free, and yet we're selling our own nuclear free legacy. And this game was happening way before Ukraine. And these are one of the things I was warning about, just because what Ukraine doesn't actually justify that behavior. That's actually Ukraine is in some ways a response to what was already happening tit for tat. And we need to own that and start acknowledging, and finally comes the situation where we see governments turn around pushing, agendas and things like climate change. We've got to start treating the planet better, but we also need to acknowledge that those agendas, again, are being used not to sort the planet out but for greater control. And the core issues of actually how we address and treat each other need to be addressed. And until we address those, ecologically, environmentally, the planet is doomed as well, because we're carrying out the same conflict resolution, which is based on might is right, and that never ends well. The few telling the many to do as we say, not as we do.